I think the Wall Street Journal was talking about how companies are cutting back on a lot of things, but one of the things they're not cutting back on is private air travel for executives. And it's a really hard message to balance for them with their teams of, we need to cut back and everyone has to do more and we're going to lay people off and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but I'm going to take a plane that costs $5,000 an hour to fly. And again, I understand all the arguments for it. I wish I could fly private. I mean, it'd be nice to not have to wait in line and all those things. But I think to me, that's just a great example of, how one of the many things you have to think about is there's the reality of it and there's the optics of it ultimately.
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Brandon Edwards. With a career spanning 28 years in healthcare marketing, Brandon has consistently redefined industry standards and led transformative initiatives. His journey into healthcare marketing began after a dynamic start running political campaigns, bringing a strategic and results-driven approach to his work. Since 2009, he guided the industry's most recognized and awarded marketing agency, earning accolades such as Best Agency to Work For and Agency of the Year 13 times in 13 years, a testament to his leadership and vision. Before this, Brandon has served as the president and COO of a national agency where he played a pivotal role in establishing and expanding its healthcare practice. His expertise is further rooted in 5 years at Tenet Healthcare, contributing to its corporate marketing, communications, and corporate strategy and venture groups. Throughout his career, Brandon has been driven by a commitment to innovation and excellence, solidifying his position as a trusted leader in healthcare marketing. Congrats on redefining industry standards and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So I'm really excited to talk with you about something that I think is challenging a lot of business leaders and especially executives lately, which is authenticity and leading authentically. And so how do you keep authenticity at the center of all your personal and professional relationships as the CEO of an agency?
Yeah, and I'll say this is, this is, I think, a super important topic. I also think it's just a big topic kind of culturally and societally right now. In fact, we think it's important enough that we just published a book called Authentic Healthcare Marketing in the Post-Truth Era, because I do think that authenticity is increasingly the sort of the center of almost all trust. And to your point, I think it's human to human. We talk about trust in organizations. What we're really talking about is trust in people that lead organizations ultimately. I think the audiences that you mentioned, even in the intro, I think, are exactly the same audiences we think about, right? Like I need to think about my board and my leadership team and my employees. We need to think about our clients. We need to think about the market and prospects. We need to think about the people that they serve ultimately, right? Because while our sale is B2B, our work is largely B2C, not entirely, but largely. And I think to your point, that authenticity is sort of at the center of it. I think that the only joke I'll make about authenticity is I remember years ago I was talking to someone and they said, that advice of like be yourself is like the worst advice ever if you're not a nice person. And I thought, well, I guess it's sort of funny, right? Like be yourself unless no one likes you, and then maybe you should pretend to be somebody else. But I do think, jokes aside, I think that authenticity piece is really can you show up as yourself and meet people sort of where they are and them meet you where you are and develop a trusting relationship that's based on that ultimately.
Yeah, I think it's something that there's people like lately, there's been more stories of like leaders taking it too far and kind of oversharing and being, but it comes across as almost disingenuous because it's such an over-the-top extreme flip side to the kind of cloistered ivory tower, not going to communicate with the peasant sort of mindset that, or at least the image that so many executives have portrayed for the last 2 decades. And so I think that there's a balance that needs to be struck between having like that authenticity and openness and humanity showing without going too far and kind of overdoing it, because if you, like I said, you don't want to be seen as like Saruman sneering down his nose at people from top the tower, but you don't want to be like wallowing in the mud with
Yeah.
like, and then below your team, you want to be, the way I kind of see it is you want to be like all sitting at the same table. Maybe you're still at the head of the table, but you're all like eating the same food, experiencing the same ups and downs, and conversing, and you're listening to people, and you're open to their input, and there's a back and forth. And so it's less about it's about reducing the distance between executives and the people on their teams and the employees and the stakeholders, but you're not like flipping the hierarchy completely, but it's about just kind of, I think it's flattening it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about your initial comment first, but I want to come back to where you finished because I think it's really important. I don't think authenticity means being equally transparent about all things personal and professional, right? Like there are things that are personal to me that are nobody's business, and I don't plan to talk about it. And I think, I mean, I will probably overshare with people I'm really close to. I think a lot of us do that, but tend to be a fairly private person otherwise, and try to be respectful of other people's privacy, right? I think so. And I think understanding where those lines are is going to be really different, right? In every relationship and in every situation. I do find it sort of peculiar how we sort of lionized CEOs in the United States. Maybe it's this, pull yourself up by the bootstraps capitalist kind of thing. But I feel like CEOs have sort of become what feudal lords were in Europe, right? In sort of pre-democratic Europe or something like that. I find it really peculiar, right? I think most CEOs I know, and I guess I hope I would put myself in this category, are like generally pretty smart people who work really, really hard, who happen to have been at the right place at the right time. Or they were willing to take some big risk and be an entrepreneur, right? Well, it's the old joke. All entrepreneurs are really just people who are unemployable. That's how we end up starting businesses or starting companies or doing things we do. I want to finish though with that gap issue. I think I personally believe that the challenge for CEOs to be authentic is in balancing two viewpoints that I think have an inherent tension. It's how do you lead? How do you set a vision? How do you lead? And how do you hold people accountable for doing what they need to do? And how do you show up to support your team and to be a servant leader in that? And I think those two things have to be equally true. We can't forfeit our right to lead, to set a vision, to hold people accountable, to sometimes make really hard choices. But I think we also owe it to people to be willing to do anything that they would do, right? To be willing. There was just an article that triggered this for me this morning. I think that the Wall Street Journal was talking about how companies are cutting back on a lot of things, but one of the things they're not cutting back on is private air travel for executives. And it's a really hard message to balance for them with their teams of, we need to cut back and everyone has to do more and we're going to lay people off and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but I'm going to take a plane that costs $5,000 an hour to fly. And again, I understand all the arguments for it. I wish I could fly private. I mean, it'd be nice to not have to wait in line and all those things. But I think to me, that's just a great example of, how one of the many things you have to think about is there's the reality of it and there's the optics of it ultimately.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what's eroded the trust between customers and businesses, and also like employees and the leadership, is that they'll say like what comes out in like the PR or the marketing or like the official message marketing communications from the leadership, and then what they actually end up doing are not consistent. There's this huge cognitive dissonance, like what's happened with going on with like Microsoft and Xbox and all, like recently, all their like the price hikes and the things that they tried to spin is, oh, this is gonna be great for the consumer, but really it's awful for the people that are, and like so people are leaving and it's like just a giant dumpster fire there. But I think it's just a clear example of what they put out. Their messaging wasn't authentic. It wasn't true. It was a spin. And I think that the way even the people that are presenting it, like, or the ones that are making these decisions and knew what they were saying wasn't actually what was going on. And so
Yeah.
just that completely, why would anyone trust what they have to say ever again until they demonstrate their, and don't take that private jet, actually like
Yeah.
cut back on your salary, or like do something that shows that the executives have as much skin in the game as the people working for them. Because until they demonstrate that and actually sit at the same table and eat the same food as everyone, like I said in the example of like,
Yeah.
then there's it's going to be really hard for customers and employees to trust anything they say.
I mean, I think, look, admittedly, I don't know much about the specific Microsoft situation you're referencing. I'm not a gamer, and I probably should have paid attention to it. But I will say this: if you're trying to spin a price hike is good for consumers, you probably already missed something. You know, like there's just say what it is, right? It's like our costs have gone up, or like whatever. Be honest about it. I think. Look, I think brands aren't perfect because people aren't perfect, right? And how we talk about our brands, how leadership talks about a company, how we talk about things, I think it has to be way more true than it isn't, right? Are there always going to be situations that are, can you say I care about people, but you laid someone off? Of course you can, right? Because laying someone off is not an expression of not caring. It's often the result of 1,000 factors that come into things. But I do think you have to behave in a way that's consistent with your mission, your vision, and your values. And no one's going to be perfect, but you have to do it way more than you miss it if you want to be seen as authentic and you want to be seen as credible.
Yeah, I think for a lot of companies, I've talked about this with people in branding on the show before, that the brand of them is they'll have it like hanging up in the break room, or kind of in a spread, like an old PowerPoint when they first put it together, but they don't live it. It's very like lip service at best. And so they don't really even know where they're going. They're kind of just chasing hype, and they're really indecisive, or they don't have a good vision for where the company's going. So their leadership is all over the place. So they make kind of these short-term kind of money grab sort of decisions that end up hurting people that aren't just like the state shareholders or the execs. And so then it erodes the trust, because they don't really even know what being authentic is. There's no sense of what is our authentic brand for our business. How are we supposed to act, or where are we going?
Yeah.
And so I think it's because there's been overall just a rush to kind of speed up the metrics, or get to the end result quicker, and not lay the foundation of really building relationships and trust with consumers and employees and the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying to get to that. Oh, we want the numbers, or that we want the stock price to go up. We want the metrics look good for this quarter. We want,
sure.
And it's like I think it's just a values mismatch between what they claim they want to achieve versus the steps they're taking to achieve it ends up biting them in the butt in the long run. And that kind of is coming back to bite them right now. I think it's because that cycle is no longer sustainable. But they've let that muscle of like, how do I build trust and be authentic and connect with people, that's atrophied in so many leaders, that they don't know how to lead without relying on all this data. They don't know how to connect. They don't know how to listen. And so there's the whole generation of executives, or whole like kind of crop of them, that aren't really fit to lead anymore. They don't really have the skills to lead in the market anymore, because it's the way they're used to running the business isn't working anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, the short-term versus long-term thing is I think is a meaningful problem, right? Because first of all, how you perform, if you're going to perform really well over the long term, you need to perform well consistently in the short term, and it needs to build, right? But I do think that a lot of that sort of more short-term thinking is, it's really a function of pressure to perform for certain businesses, certain industries. that I think is just sometimes unrealistic on some level. And look, public companies are, a little different from private companies. Small family-owned business is different. I mean, there's lots of variety in that. But I think ultimately, if you're just really direct, I'll give you a great example. Last company I built, we were very clear in our strategic plan when we started the company. This company is being built to be sold, right? This is not a lifestyle company that's there to support me and other executives or other owners. We are building something that should have long-term lasting value, enterprise value. And that means that you think everything you do is guided by that in many ways, right? It's how you hire, how you pay, how you think about it. We very openly talked about it. It's really unusual to do that in a professional services firm. But we were just really clear about it. That's what we're doing. We don't know when that's going to happen, right? It could be in 5 years. It could be in 10. It could be in 20. It ended up happening about 7 years into that business's existence, which then started a 5-year clock, right, of how long we were sort of working through our earnout process with the buyer. But I think in that particular case, just being completely open and authentic and transparent about, look, we're building a company here, and this company is going to have value, and that value is going at some point to be realized by people who invested in it. But that doesn't mean the company is going to stop or the company is going to stop being great, right? Those are completely different choices. I think there are probably people that would build companies and would authentically say, I have no desire to ever sell it, right? Like, this is here as a lifestyle business, or this is here as a passion project for me, or whatever it is. I'm not saying there's only sort of one right answer to it, but I think it's just being honest about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and being willing to explain it to people who may not benefit from those choices in the same way that you do. I think that's often where we get tripped up, right? Is think about your Microsoft example. Raising prices is good for the company's bottom line. Maybe not good for customers, maybe frustrating, but it's really hard for them to come out and say, look, our PE earnings ratio is extraordinarily high and we need to generate more profitability to support the stock price. So we're raising prices on this product. It's honest, it's truthful, but that's not what they're saying, right? They're trying to turn it into something else. And I think that sort of cuts across everything, right? It's like just being willing to say things to people that they may not want to hear, but will respect you for your honesty and directness.
Yeah, and I think I love that example of you talk about the business, how you said, because if you're interviewing or you're putting out talking to someone who might be joining your team, saying, hey, by the way, like, what are your long-term plans? If you're looking for a company that's like for your whole career, like 30 years, whatever, like, we're going to plan on selling this, there's going to be this big like inflection point where things are going to change, and like this, there might not be the same sort of role available. But if you bring on people who go, yeah, I'm looking for something where where it fits their goals and fits what they're looking for, and you're just open and honest with them, then that sets the relationship off on a much healthier note. And it makes sure everyone knows that they have the same kind of mindset and expectations for the business. And so I think the fact that you had that understanding when you were launching it, and you were able to stick to that and communicate it, makes it able to lead with that authenticity that so many businesses don't have, because either they didn't really have a strong vision to begin with, or they've completely lost track of where they are and don't really have any guiding light. And so I think it's a good first step for businesses, like the leadership to make is, okay, where exactly are we going again? And what is authentic to us? And what is it that how do we want to show up? Because if they don't have that, then it's like the adage where you default to your habits. So you like I'm blanking on the exact wordage, but it's like your performance or how you show up is based on whatever like your habits are, not on what your kind of aspirations are. So if you can claim all these great claims, but if it comes at the day-to-day actions are going to be based on kind of your lowest amount of effort that you have to get through them oftentimes.
Sure.
It's about those habits you built. So if you don't have that kind of habit built of like, hey, the check on like, hey, we're going in this direction all the time, then you're going to be floundering a lot more, and being authentic is almost impossible in that case.
Well, I'll try to give an example. I think, frankly, leveraging some of what we talk about in the book, but not really for why we wrote it. We really wrote it for healthcare organizations that are trying to figure out how to be credible and relevant with 100% of the population when you have about half the population now that rejects institutions, experts, and science, right? So that's not where I'm going to go with this, to be clear. But I do think that sort of authenticity takeaway is even more challenging, though, for people in this kind of post-truth era, because we can now, if we want to, I'll just say be authentic, right? Be ourselves and believe exactly what we believe and say exactly what we want to say. And we can find a small tribe of people that will constantly reinforce how right that is, right? And we can hear news that supports it, and we can listen to podcasts and go to webinars and watch TV shows, all of which support our political and view and other views. And we can surround ourselves with people online and social media and other venues that can do all of that. And so I think that that's authentic, but I also think that there's danger in it, right? Because it never forces us to consider the views of others that may not agree with us or that our decisions may impact, right? I actually think often the very healthiest relationships are relationships that are based on someone who's cares enough about you to disagree. Yeah. And to let you know, and that is its own authenticity. It doesn't always feel good in the moment, but I think I don't know how to replace the value of that over the course of my life. So,
yeah, I think it's a great insight there. And thank you so much for connecting with me today, Brandon. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Brandon, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.